thinking bottom up, because most have been conditioned simply to accept what's being told from the top down. So how do we go about changing their views and to get them moving in the right direction?
How do we bring about change, Patrick?
All right. Thanks, Chris, for giving me the easy one. Okay. Well, I think the short answer is you at this stage, there's very little you can do in the short term. In the long term, you're talking about reforming the very nature, I think, of the educational system and other foundational aspects of society. But if I give you one example of something that could arguably be done, is that from a bottom-up perspective, pressure could come to reform respective political systems. Give you one example. I'm going to throw out a habit of a lifetime here and say something positive about a Labour government in the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister Brown is, well, we can discuss his motivations another time, but he appears to favour introducing the right of initiative into the British political system, which is something, as you're probably aware, has been long-standing in parts of the United States, most famously or infamously in the state of California. And this would allow ordinary people to, independent of political parties, independent of government, to demand, if a sufficient number so chose, to place a question on the ballot at election time or this kind of thing. Given how loaded the political system is against sort of populist tendencies, and how the media and the establishment are determined not to have their sort of happy situation upset by, particularly by anything politically incorrect. I think that kind of change, that kind of reform, is probably the only way in the short to medium term that you're going to see any kind of real change. The other changes are absolutely necessary and very worthwhile, but they are long-term because our freedoms have been under assault and have been chipped away at over such a long period that you just simply cannot turn this ship around very quickly.
You said in your speech, I've heard you say before on the radio, that you believe by the end of the decade we might have a turnabout. Is that because things are going to get to such a bad point that it'll break? Do things have to get a lot worse before they get better, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are individuals who are beginning to fear for fundamental freedoms and starting to see how ridiculous so much of what is being done to us is. But I do think that in this area, as in most others, things do have to get even worse. They have to become so obviously and so tangibly ridiculous before the average person says to themselves, one, this is unacceptable, and two, I might actually think about doing something about it. So if I was to, again, break another habit of a lifetime and say something cynical, I would suggest that we almost want to encourage more of the craziness, because the sooner it gets worse, the sooner there'll be the popular blowback, and we might actually begin to see the end of all of this nonsense.
Well, sort of following that up, there's a couple of points. I've got a suspicion the only reason Brown is interested in this public right isn't actually to do that. It's that it is within the European Treaty. It's not something he wants to do. It's the fact that he's no choice because the right of initiative is in the Lisbon Treaty. Quick point though, it's within the framework of the treaty, i.e. you can ask the question. We don't have to listen, but you can ask the question. However, I think there is something the Labour government did do that really is useful. And I'm sure you have similar things elsewhere, and that is the Freedom of Information inquiry. Everybody can ask these little annoying questions, and in the end, they can get through. You can work out, you can find things out, you really can. And if you don't get an answer, you can write it again. And I refer to that great chap, cigar smoker. There's a wonderful photograph in the papers early last week coming out of hospital. There's a great stone in his mouth. But Winston Churchill, keep on buggering on. That's how you do something, and it is truly the only way. If you don't have access to the levers of power, you just got to keep on buggering on. And things like the freedom of information requests are a very effective way of doing so. And when you finally do dig out something interesting, tell you what, the press is starting to get interested in this sort of thing. So you can get it out there. You can, and each time one of these questions reveals some more of this devious underhandness. And again, I know it's a climate change thing, but what happened with the Hadley Centre is because they're being hauled in front of certain courts now because they refuse to answer the FOI requests. And it is a legal requirement for them to do so. And as I know, we're not the only country, in fact we're one of the last countries to have these things. So this is a way that practically individuals can make a difference.
Well, I have a question now to Mr. Basham. Now, can it be sillier than what we have reached? I mean, you said, oh, the crazier, the
I'd be sillier than no.
I'm sure you are. No, but I mean, if we take the example of global warming, I mean, it has been in the newspapers, at least in the UK, for the last 3 months. Have we heard any government making any apologies or no? I mean, this guy what's his name, Pachari? Is he resigning? No. So can it be crazier? Can it be crazier than that? And what does the Cato Institute do, by the way?
2 questions, huh?
Yeah, you can just answer the second one. I'm just being curious.
Just a second.
Yeah, the Cato Institute. I mean, what does it do?
Does anyone else want to know what the Cato Institute does?
I've written for it. Cato?
Yeah.
This place?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've written 2 papers for Cato, one in their journal called Regulation and the other the Cato Journal. And they are libertarian leaning a think tank, and they welcome work that is off the mainstream. So alternative viewpoints, very pro-market, free market. And this goes very nicely into what I wanted to say about this discussion. And that is, if there's one thing that some of these so-called scientists really fear is loss of respect. So the more people who can actually show why many of the results that they do are implausible and in effect embarrass them, I think the better we will be. For example, the economic studies that I was talking about earlier, in the paper I wrote, and I didn't say it I don't think today, most economists would be embarrassed to try to publish this stuff. So, and I would assume that some public health people could be embarrassed as well. So I think that's one way, but the other part of this, and this has a lot to do with the Cato Institute, is that this issue of the media is so strong here, and the media is enabling so much of this garbage science. So you must embarrass them as well somehow. And people have to write up and say, so-and-so wrote an article in the New York Times or whatever it is. This is a fascinating study of garbage science. And I think that some of these writers are going to then start to question, the information that I've been given, you mean it's only one-sided? Maybe I should check some other sources or ask some other so-called experts. And, if they don't fear for their respect, then maybe it's all lost. But I don't know. Hopefully some of them do.